is this?
I thought we fly. Why are we underwater?
We're underwater.
Hold your breath.
Let's travel around the world now.
Okay. Where are we going?
I don't know. Let's go see Rick.
Maryland?
Maryland.
Okay, we can do that.
You know what? Just screw this. Screw this. What are we doing?
I don't know. What are we doing?
We're talking about setups.
Setups.
Yeah.
Okay. Hi, I'm Bert Kammerer.
And I'm Bobby Watts.
Welcome to SmackTalk.
That was awesome.
Hey,
So here we are.
here we are.
We're going to talk about setups today.
Episode trace.
What's up with 3?
3 is good stuff, man. All the best episodes are 3. Return of the Jedi. Back to the Future 3. Go back to Old West.
What else?
So this
is
one's
3.
Anyway, all right. Well, I have here intro. Make it less boring. I think we did that. So check. Questions. We need to talk about our microphones. We got new microphones. Bert made a cool little video about it, and we invested some money into it. We have some cool sound now, so hopefully there won't be as many audio interruptions. We apologize for that in the first 2 episodes.
Yeah, definitely. We should have pretty decent audio right now. And actually, I was pretty happy with the flybar versus flybarless audio episode.
Yeah.
It was pretty solid, so we're happy about that.
Okay, cool, excellent. Well, we also have another interview planned for you guys this time. This time it's a bit more serious than the first 2. This one's with Scott Gray. The first 2 were just meant to be fun and break up the monotony. If you don't like the interviews, there's a nice fast forward button on the bottom of the screen. Just click it and
Either that or just take your slider in the computer and just move it, just skip it, move it forward.
just skip it.
Yeah.
Or back, you know, it doesn't, but
we our goal is just to do interviews that not only bring a very well-known pilot like Scott Gray, but that bring just everyday people, characters that are either funny or unique in some way, shape, or form, like Rick or like Ray. And of course, we will always have interviews that are very funny. Some of them will have language. Some of them will not have any language and will be more formal. Some of them will be more boring. Some of them will be more, that's our goal, is just to bring a little bit of everything. Just make it very, very...
Trying to mix it up.
Mix it up as much as we can. Absolutely. So.
Cool. All right, also, since we're doing a setup episode, we wanted to mention that a lot of the ideas that we got, a lot of topics that we're going to cover today, comes from the little suggestions tab on our website. So if you go to smacktalkrc.com and hit the suggestions button and just email us, we read every single one of them. And a lot of the topics we're covering today came from those suggestions.
Yeah, a lot of the stuff that you're doing with the setup comes from there. Exactly. So just visit, like Bobby said, smacktalkrc.com, click on suggestions, and you have to enter your name and your email, and the next time you come in, it'll remember you, so you don't have to fill that out again. You just make another suggestion if you want. And there was one suggestion that was pretty interesting, and it was about bringing some naked chicks. I don't think we can bring naked chicks, but we could definitely bring some chicks.
We could do that.
We'll probably do that sometime on the road.
We could do that.
We have some plans. We're actually talking about plans for Urcha. I don't know. We'll see what happens. But
all right, we'll see what we can do. Maybe if we make it to like episode, 25, 50, 100, you know how that goes. Usually they do big celebrations.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh man, I mean, if this is episode 3, then geez, you better watch out. We're also going to read out some cool questions if we ever have any funny questions or anything like that. Somebody posted on our suggestions page. He said, quote, "How do you sneak the crash wreckage past the wife into the house? And what things do you say to her to get a spare parts fund?" Bert?
I was married once, and I was not a sponsored pilot. But it was actually easy for me because I would go to the hobby shop, Graves RC in Orlando, and I would wrench at the hobby shop.
Oh.
So I never had to bring the wreckage to the house. As far as trying to buy new stuff, that was pretty tough. I don't have any special. I don't have any advice for you guys. You're screwed.
That's true. You know, I have seen a picture on one of the internet forums. I saw a guy. There's this picture and it says, "My heli fund and your shopping fund." Mm-hmm. So make it equal, man.
Yeah, exactly. You know what I'm saying? Exactly. That's
so anyway, we hope that helps you out. But anyway, like I said, please visit our website and click on the suggestions tab. We read every one of them.
Yeah, definitely.
But other than that, I think we're going to kick into...
so we're going to go to the interview. Let's go to the interview first.
Let's do it.
Yeah.
Excellent.
Hi guys, we're here at the Port Charlotte Fun Fly in Florida, and I'm here with Scott Gray. I can't even mention all the awards and all the winnings that Scott has. I mean, he's, I don't know, what, national, international, like F3C?
Yeah, F3C and some 3D stuff. I've been doing this for 17 years now, so...
This episode we're doing, Scott, is about helping people how to set up their helicopters better. And I know that you, obviously being a F3C pilot, you probably have taken setups more into account when you go through, you know, your helicopters. Tell people how important it is set up. How critical is it?
Yeah, I think setups, you got to get it right. Otherwise, you're going to be doing a lot of practice for, you know, not a lot of returns. So it's good to spend a lot of time getting the pitch range right, and especially if you got a nitro heli, get the engine running well, because, you know, that's something that you don't want to be chasing either. So I think just really making sure you get the pitch range right and setting up to how you want it to feel, and not copying pilots that fly different than you, because sometimes people like it more sensitive than others, right? So
exactly, that's a question we get all the time. It's like, how do you set up your helicopter? Well, we set it up in a way that's probably different than yours, that's probably different than Bobby's, and everybody has to kind of adjust. But it is always, I guess, important to go through the setup meticulously, especially, you know, if you're looking into getting into competition or doing a demo or something. The better your helicopter fly, the better the chances at having a successful, I guess, demonstration, right?
Yeah, it's got to be consistent too. Every flight you want it to be the same, especially as you're learning. You don't want to be changing things too much. A lot of guys ask me what I should change next flight and all this, but if your setup's pretty good, I suggest just leave it and just learn. Just keep practicing and practicing with what you've got, because that's really what makes it, you know, is practice on something you know, rather than always changing.
Cool. And for all you guys that don't know who Scott Gray is, of course you have been like under a tree probably for the last so many years, but very, very briefly, you're from Canada, and how did you get into helicopters? Just very briefly, how long ago, and how did you get? You said 13 years?
17 years actually, I think. Started when I was 12, and my dad got me into it. He owns a hobby shop in Kitchener-Waterloo, where we're from. So I basically grew up in a hobby store and always had toys to play with, and you know, so I started in helis and airplanes too, but really got interested in the helis and started competing, and you know, here I am still doing it. So
Bobby wanted me to ask you finally, what is this with your wife likes to dance when you're like flying for competition or something? What's up with that?
She calls for me at a lot of the 3D events, and I don't know what she's doing behind me, but she makes sure I'm doing the right maneuvers. But apparently people say she's getting down, she's dancing. I don't know, but
that's cool. You guys make a pretty good team together, so.
Yeah. It's good to have a wife in sports with my hobby in sports, so she likes coming around to the events. Yeah.
All right, thanks a lot, Scott. Appreciate it, man.
Thanks, Bert.
All right, now I'm going to show you how I set up my helicopter. In this case, I'm going to show you how I set up my 700. I actually just did this. This model's pretty new, so just did this not too long ago. A few things I wanted to point out. These are just some different mixing ratios and stuff like that I've been playing around with. This all applies for a stock helicopter, you know, Raptor through Hirobo, Skidoo, or something like that. So everything's about the same. This model is CCPM, meaning there's 3 servos that drive the Swashplate, and they take care of the collective and the cyclic control. A Raptor would be a slightly different setup, but most of this still applies. So the first thing you want to do whenever you build your helicopter is build all of your linkages to the manufacturer's recommendations. When I built this 700, they actually did a really good job. All the linkages lined up really, really closely to where they needed to be. So first thing I'm going to do, turn the helicopter on, get everything working. My sticks are pretty much centered and stuff like that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to center stick on my radio and make sure that I'm exactly at center. So I'm going to go to For instance, in this case, I'm going to go to the servo screen. And you can see here, as I move my throttle stick up and down, I can get it perfect. So I'm at 0. Now what I want to do is I want to look at the bell cranks right here. On the 700, this is your driving geometry position. What you want to be able to do is you want to get the slot in the bell crank perfectly equal with the slot in the frame. So I'll do it for this back servo, for instance. Mine's dead on. I'll do it for the front one. And this one's dead on. That's because when I set it up, I followed my own advice. So you do this, and then you work your way back to the servo in this case. Other helicopters, you would start at the servo and move 90 degrees. This one, we're starting at the bell crank and moving backwards. So what I did was I built these links perfectly and then got this angle right here to match this angle right here. So it's perfect, so they're always parallel. For my Fury 55, for instance, I would set up, if the servo horn is this way, or if the spline's coming out this way, I would set the servo horn to come out 90 degrees, and then the rod goes straight up. So it's the same 90-degree principle everywhere. The elevator is the exact same way. So let me rotate it around. The servos are pretty angry today. So I have the servo horn perfectly 90 right here, and this is outputting at a perfectly 90-degree angle right here in the back. You can check your the little push thing right here through the guides. So anyway, after we've done that, we're going to put it on. If you need to use sub trim, there's a lot of debate over that. I've never had a problem with that. Use it. If you're too lazy to find a horn that's perfect, if you just want to fly, that's fine. There's no problem with that. Just go to your sub trim menu. If you're anywhere above like 80, it's probably not a good idea to use sub trim. You probably want to find a different wheel. But with this Align one, you know, they give you like, I think it's 8 different positions, and they give you a bunch of horns. So it worked out fine. So I used that. So now that your bell cranks are on straight, we want to look into, let's see, for instance, we can go to throttle. So we'll do that. We'll work on the head stuff later. Right now we're just getting the servos centered. So as you can see, since my servos are centered, my throttle is perfectly up and down. This, I set the arm itself on the carburetor to be perfectly up and down. And I also have my throttle body set to the middle position. So it's perfectly at center. So it's at center, everything's 90 degrees and lined up. That's the biggest trick with these helicopters. You want to get everything perfectly 90 degrees if at all possible. So then with the throttle, we're going to go to full stick. Actually, let me go into my endpoint menu just to show you. You want the endpoint to be perfectly 100 everywhere. So for instance, we're going to scroll down to throttle. So as you can see right here, this is 100 and 100 right there. So we'll go to full throttle and we'll check it out. We have, it's fully open right here. And then the bottom, you can kind of fudge that because you've got a lot of room to work with your throttle hold and your throttle cut. But as you can see right down here, it's just around where my cut position is, which is fine. So that's a good start. The rudder also, we're going to get into that later. But with the rudder, when I go in, well, I'll switch, oops. When I go into non-heading hold, you can see my rudder is perfectly set at 90 degrees, bell crank set at 90, and then we'll work our way to the tail later. So after all the servos have been centered, what we want to do is we want to get the swash moving in the correct direction. So as you can see here, I'm going to raise and lower my collective stick. For the CCPM, you can see one of these servos is off. So it's either the aileron or the pitch. So I'm going to go to my reverse screen. And I'm going to reverse number 1. We'll just give this a try. We'll see if this works. Yep, there we go. So now when I raise my throttle stick up, it goes up. Down is down. Now we'll check our directions. We're going to go forward and backwards. So we'll check elevator forward. Oh, I gave it backwards. So we know that that needs to be reversed. So I'm going to go into my swash menu. Spectrum users would do the same. I'll go to swash, go to elevator, and you can see this number is negative right now. Because it was backwards, I'm going to take it to a positive number. So we'll just go to 50, for instance. Cool, so forward is forward, back is back, left is left, right is right. And positive is positive, negative is negative. Another thing to always keep in mind, this is from personal experience with my first Raptor 90 ever. Don't just look at the swash, always look at the way the blades are traveling. Raptor 90, for instance, the swash will go down as the pitch goes up. That's not a good idea. Always make sure you have positive and negative pitch. We'll check that on a pitch gauge. So, as Bert's trying to get my blades leveled here. So that's good. What we're going to do now is we're going to pop the head off, and I'm going to show you how to level the swash. The first thing that you want to do now that you've taken the head off is to check that your swash plate is level at center stick. So put your swash plate to 0 degrees, so right in the middle, and then put your leveling tool on to ensure that it's perfectly centered without any sort of trim or anything. To achieve this, you pop off your linkages, either one of your pitch, aileron, or elevator one, to get it perfectly centered mechanically. Now I'm going to show you how to check your positive and your negative pitch. This is what you adjust in the radio. We're going to turn the radio on, give it full positive and full negative degrees, collective, and we're going to see if the swash is perfectly level at the full range. So, we'll fire it up. I think right now we're at full negative. Okay, and what we're going to do is we're going to check it this way and this way. You want to check it both ways. So, actually this is pretty darn good. Let's go over to this side. And it's pretty straight. I don't think this one needs any corrections. So we'll go positive. And what you're looking for is you're looking for light. You're looking to see some light, because if it's off, the servo is going to go one way or the other. Okay, it's a little bit off right here. Aileron is fine. For the elevator wise right here, I can see that it's down a little bit. So if my leveling tool's at the top, it's kind of like this. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to go to my swash menu, and I'm going to go down, and I'm going to go to pitch to aileron and pitch to elevator. So for this instance, I'm at full pitch. So I'm at full collective. You can see this light is blinking. So I'm going to go to my elevator, and I'm going to change it till it gives some back elevator. I think that's about right. We'll just go about 4 points and see how it looks. That's actually perfect. And then we'll check here once again. Cool. So, according to our leveling tool through our whole range, full positive and full negative, it should be straight. Just to triple check, Bert and I always do this. Whenever we go out to the field afterwards, even though it's perfectly straight on the bench, depending on your CG of your model and different stuff, it could wander when it's going full positive or full negative. So we will show you what happens when we take it out to the field. We'll do a full collective climb, and then we'll flip it upside down. Do a full collective climb negative, and we're going to show you how that affects exactly how the model flies when it's perfect. Okay, cool. Now I put the head back on. Now we're going to check everything from the swash plate up. So we know that our swash plate is straight and level and everything's good. So what we're going to do is we're going to check the washout arms and the flybar cage, as well as the blades. We're going to make sure we're at 0 degrees. So right now I'm at exactly center stick. First thing I want to do is I want to work from the swash plate up. So right now I'm at the mixing arm. So I'm going to lean back. These are perfect. The washout arms. I call these the mixing arms. I apologize for this.
Explain what the washout arms do.
The washout arms, they what? They give your inputs from the swash plate up to your flybar. Are you happy?
Yes.
Great. So I just got quizzed and apparently I passed. So our mixing arms right now are perfectly straight, which is good. Now we want to make sure our flybar cage is perfectly straight. In this case, we can look and we can see that it is. It's straight like this. Then we keep moving up. I'm going to check my paddles, which I've already aligned, and they're pretty close. A lot of paddle alignment is pretty tricky. I just eyeball mine. I think Bert just eyeballs his. You can get some really nice paddle gauges that fit over. It's almost like 2 pitch gauges, and you align them to get them perfectly. Either that or eyeballing, I'm always off either way. So I just do this, and as we'll show you later, we're actually going to track the paddles in the air. You're actually going to look and make sure and see that your paddles are spinning in the same plane. Last thing that we're going to do is work our way up to the blades. So everything here is 90 degrees all the way from the servo all the way up to your flybar cage. So now we're going to check 0 degrees. So this trick was actually taught to me by Ray Stacy. It's an awesome trick, works great. Nah, Bert Kammerer never taught me this. It's a great trick. It's just awesome. At the field, you don't even need a pitch gauge. We're going to show you how to use a pitch gauge too. But this is great for when you want to check stuff real quickly at the field. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to bend my blades back.
Put some load on your servo.
Servos love this. So bend it back, and as you can see here, bring it closer to the camera. At 0 degrees, the blades are perfectly in line with each other. Yeah, there's slop in it. Okay, so let's look at the slop. Slop that way, slop that way. So we're perfect. Now, 0 degrees around center is not the most crucial thing in the world. Honestly, the biggest thing that you really want to feel for in the air is to see that your model climbs the same speed positive as it does negative. So if you're 0, if your mid stick ends up being 1 or 2 degrees, that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. But 0 degrees is good just to get you in the right idea that you're in the right pitch range. So now we're going to get a pitch gauge, which is oh so exciting. This one's actually brought to you by Miniature Aircraft USA, land of the free, home of the brave. Okay, so now we're at 0 degrees, and we're just going to check it. So biggest thing with a pitch gauge is to keep your flybar level. If your flybar ratio is different, it'll be, if it's not 1-to-1, it'll be different at different angles. So you always want to have it at 0 degrees. So right here, I'm going to check it, and sure enough, I'm at 0. So our little trick worked. So thank you, Ray, and thank you, Bert. So here we're going to go to full collective. So here I went to full positive, and we're going to check it. So right now I have my rates at 50 degrees. I just set, or sorry, 50% on the swash menu. We're just going to see what we're looking at. So right here we're looking at around 11 degrees positive and negative. We're at, let's see. We're at around 11 degrees negative. So how about that? So we know that our swash range is it's good. It should climb up positive and negative the same way. So we're, like I said, we're going to show you how to do that later. We'll also check cyclic at this point. So that's collective. Collective's pretty easy. When you check your collective, you want your flybar to be straight, and you just simply move your stick up and down. To check cyclic, I've seen a lot of people. I've seen a guy take this and put it on his flybar paddle to check cyclic pitch. Worked for him, not for me. Anywho, to check cyclic pitch. So we're going to go once again back to 0. So I can use my numbers. The radio, I've already established that 0 is truly 0. So right now we're going to check elevator. Susie, if I could have you, if I could borrow you for a sec, I need you to give full forward elevator. So we're going to hold the flybar level. Okay, we're at 0, and you can have somebody hold, yeah, there you go. Push full forward on the cyclic, on elevator.
You said aileron earlier.
Oh, aileron, I'm sorry. Sorry, right now we're checking the elevator. If the flybar is this way, as you can see, when you push, it actually gives pitch this way. If you were to go like this and push elevator, you really wouldn't see anything. Anyway, so we're checking our elevator right now, and she's pushing full forward, and I'm reading about 6 degrees, okay, if you can pull back. So this is when it's good to have somebody nearby, especially if you're filming. We're also about 6 degrees, cool. So right now we know that our range, both forward and backwards on the elevator is right. So also we would do the same exact thing for aileron. The only difference is, we don't have to do it exactly for you, is we'd move the tail boom this way, and we would hold the flybar once again straight, level, hold full aileron, check it, hold full aileron the other way and check it. So you want your ranges to be right. A lot of guys ask, how much pitch should I run? Well, as a good start for anybody, from hovering all the way up to 3D sport flying and stuff, I'd really recommend around 10 and 10, 10 degrees positive, 10 degrees negative. And on the cyclic, somewhere around 7.5 degrees. This is read to you by your pitch gauge. Now, you can always tweak that in the air if it's too fast or too slow. You can always change that. Bert and I personally, I think on this model, I've been running, maybe 12 degrees, 13 degrees on the collective. And cyclic, usually I max it out as much, so probably 9 or 10 degrees. Now, that doesn't mean you should run it. If you're bogging your motor constantly, then back it off. We've just been taught, I was taught with the old V-blades that really dug in hard, good collective management. So you really have to go kind of easy on the sticks. It's really good for when you want them to go fast, but every once in a while you just kind of have to, peg the stick and come back to let your motor breathe. It's different for everybody, different strokes for different folks. I know Beast, for instance, Beast does the same stuff we do, and he flies with 10 degrees, 7 degrees. I think Nick Maxwell, I don't think he runs too much pitch either. He runs around 10 and 10, 7 and 7. But for flying styles, it's different. I kind of like to do a mix of everything. It's just on a feel. So start with 10, 10, 7.5, 8 degrees, and work your way out from there. Okay, now I'm gonna show you how to set the throttle hold and the throttle cut. So as you can see earlier, I set my throttle to where at full stick it was going all the way open, and at full close it was going all the way closed. So now I'm gonna set my throttle hold. Throttle hold is like the most important thing on the helicopter. If nothing else is set up right, make sure your hold is right, because if something weird happens, you need to be able to kill your motor. If you can't kill your motor, you have no control over your model. So we're gonna go in here to our throttle hold, and I'm gonna click it. So right now I'm at 27%, just some arbitrary number. And I can see right here, I'm a good bit above where it should idle. It's probably gonna idle, you know, if here's your whole range, if you have your tick marks and stuff, I think it's maybe like 10 or 15 degrees off the tick mark, just a little bit. So I'm gonna lower it just a little bit. So here we'll go to, I don't know, 23%. That should be okay. Yeah, that looks about right. And we just want to make sure that in normal mode, the trim is about where it needs to idle, and the throttle hold, it should be on idle as well. I'm also going to show you a trick once we fire the motor up to make sure that your throttle direction is going the right way, because you don't want a hot start, that's for sure. We're also going to hit the throttle cut. Throttle cut obviously kills your motor. So I'm going to lower my collective stick and hit the cut. And as we can see here, once again, it's just a little bit high. So you just want to lower it almost till you can kind of hear the servo binding, and then just back off. So we're going to go to throttle cut here. Where is it? New radio, forgive me. There it is. So 25, we'll go to, I don't know, 20 or so. 17, we'll check it. 17, yeah, we're good. We're at the very bottom line of that on the barrel. So what we can do is we can actually take our ball link pliers, pop it off, and put it all the way at the fully closed position. Put our servo arm over it, and it's good right there. We will get out of cut, go to full throttle, and triple check it, and we're good right there. Cool, so our throttle's set. Now that the throttle's set, I'm going to show you how to set up governor. Okay, now we're going to set up our governor. In this case, I have a Multi-Gov Pro on my 700. I find it really easy to set up, and it really holds well. I think Aerospire did a really good job with it, so I've been using them for the past year or so. So anyway, to get into our programming mode, we're going to hold this button. Okay, this program's a lot like the GV1, for instance, so I can set my head speeds and stuff like that. So for instance, in normal, you can see I have like 1650. Idle up 1, I have 1800. Idle up 2, I have, 1960. And the 3D mode just refers to overspeed, so it's like a rev max in that regard. So we'll go to the next feature. For instance, in this feature, let me cross the screen right here. In this feature right here, what we could do is we can change our head speeds. So normal mode, like I said, like we said in our first episode, I'd recommend anything 1700 or something like that. Idle up 2, I usually run a little bit more aggressive, but not too badly. 1800, 1850 is good. And then idle up to 1960, we're really trying to get everything out of this motor. So I'll go to the next menu. Gear ratio 8:2, make sure you set that correctly. This TRX is 8:2:1. Sensor test, you can just turn your starter shaft. And here I have the Spectrum backplate sensor. You can see on, off, as it rotates around. There we go. So we know that our sensor's good. Idle. When you set your idle and your full position, that's really, really, really important for these governors. If you ever have a problem that seems to be like a governor problem, always reset your idle and your full idle and your full throttle position, because that'll really make a difference. So as you can see here, I have idle, and that's right. And you can see the milliseconds change as I go to idle to full throttle. So just for fun, I'll reset it. So I'm going to hit my value, set idle, and then high. I'm going to raise my stick to the top. So it can test. If you were to look at my throttle right now, I'd be at an idle position, and then right now I'd be at a high position. You can hear it change. Okay, the governor test is one. Really, that's all I do with the governor. It's very simple as that. Just as we showed before, you have your throttle set correctly with your throttle hold, and your throttles at the idle range down below here, and then full throttle's full throttle. Set up your governor correctly and kick yourself a goal. Okay, now we're going to go over your tail setup. I'm really not going to go into the 520 setup too much. For the most part, Futaba did a really good job with the manual. It's pretty self-explanatory. The biggest problems I ran into with the 520, or the Spartan for that matter, always make sure that whenever you're done with the setup here that I'm going to tell you, that you always go and you hover your model and idle up 1, for instance, idle up 2, with it in non-heading hold mode, meaning that's in normal mode. When it's in normal mode, you want to make sure that the rudder's not drifting in any way, shape, or form, so that when you click out of heading hold into normal mode, the tail will just sit there solid. Then you can click back into heading hold and go fly. The rudder needs to be at that neutral point in order for it to hold effectively. We're going to show you how to do that later on in the episode when we go fly. The biggest thing I want to show you now is just the basics of how to set up just any gyro, a 401, a CSM, anything like that. The biggest thing I've seen is when people will have a brand new model, they'll just kind of guess on which direction the tail should move. So I'm just going to show you the for sure way of how to set this thing up. So a trick that my buddy showed me from back home that I've always used for the past 5 years or so is to take your top tail blade and to fold it forward, pointing towards the nose of your helicopter. So for instance, right now I'm in non-heading hold mode, I'm in rate mode. To see if your stick is moving the correct way, when I give left rudder, I want the tail blade to point left. When I give right rudder, it's going to point right. Very simple. Left goes left, right goes right. It's as simple as that. You can't mess it up. So now I'm going to unfold that. Now I'm going to show you which direction the gyros should compensate your rudder input. So let me show you right here. So the gyro's sole purpose is to compensate any sort of movement that would happen during your flight. So for instance, like I said, I'm still in rate mode, so I know that my direction's right, left is left, right is right. If that was backwards, you would go into your reverse menu and reverse your rudder channel. So for this, I think it'd be channel 4. So now that I know that it's correct, I'm going to give left rudder, for instance. So left rudder on the 700 makes my horn go forward. Okay, when it goes forward, I know that I want to have, whenever I give left rudder, I want my helicopter to compensate for that. So if the nose were to move right, I'd want the rudder to go left to compensate for that. So left in this case is forward. So if I were to nudge the helicopter nose right, it wants to move forward, which is left. So let's check it out. So here we go. If you couldn't see that, we'll do it again. Just like that. I can do it real slow. As you can see, just like that, when I'm pushing the nose right, it's compensating that way. If that were to be backwards, for instance, you would go into your gyro settings, the Spartan or the 520, and you would hit the reverse button. The next thing that you want to do is you want to set your travel on the rudder itself. You always want to set for full travel. So meaning I'm going the full extent. Even if you don't want to set your pirouette, your pirouette speed that fast, you always want the maximum amount of travel because that gives a lot more room for your gyro to work with. Your pirouette speed is actually set on your rudder channel for any gyro out there. So you're going to go to your endpoint menu and lower or raise your whole value of the travel in your endpoint menu to make your pirouette speed faster or slower.
All right, guys, I'm going to go ahead and show you a couple of little differences here as they pertain to a Spectrum system in comparison to the setup with the Futaba radio that Bobby just went over. But basically it's actually pretty much the same. The Spectrum system and the Futaba systems are obviously very different when it comes to the way you move through menus, but the overall way in which you set up your model is the same. You still have to go through your sub trims and your endpoint adjustments, pitch curves and throttle curves, and everything else is the same. One thing that I want to make sure that you guys are clear on is the fact that the reason why Bobby didn't go through pitch curve setup on the radio is because Bobby and I do not modify our pitch curves. We leave them alone. We don't touch them. The reason for that is that we try to achieve a mechanically sound setup where everything is perfectly at 90 degrees. We start with the servo wheel like he showed you before. We move on to the bell cranks up to the swash, and then from there up to the
the blade grips, mixing arms and blade grips. I'll go ahead and center my swash here so it looks better. But basically, once we have a mechanically sound setup and everything is perfectly straight and at 90 degrees like it should be, then we don't need to worry about pitch curves. We'll leave it the way it is. Futaba goes, I believe, from -100 to +100. Spectrum, it goes from 0 to 50 to 100. And if we have a crash or a problem, we have to change servos, modify the head, whatever it is. You know, we do everything mechanically so that the servo electronically, the radio electronically remains the same, and it just makes it easier. It's not a headache. Aside from that, differences between Spectrum and Futaba, really nothing special. I'm going to go ahead on my radio here, and for example, let's see here. As you can see, your servo reversing is pretty much the same, and then sub trims, as you can see, I have 0 sub trims on all my servos, and then your endpoint adjustment, same deal, swash mix and so forth. Throttle curve, this is an easy one because we run governors. We really don't worry about throttle curves too much. As you can see, my normal curve starts at 0, goes up to 45, 65, and that one is inhibited, and then 100. And that's for normal mode. And for idle up 1 and 2, it's 100% flat. It's a flat curve all the way up. The reason why I'm running a flat curve is because I'm running a Rev Max limiter. This is the 7100R receiver from Spectrum. And with the Rev limiter, it's really not a governor. It's not capable of increasing your throttle. It's only capable of decreasing it, governing it down. So you do have to have 100% throttle in order for this to work properly. Otherwise, you're going to be losing power. If your throttle curve is, say, 170 and 100, you're going to be losing a lot of power because this device is not going to be able to increase your throttle. It can only decrease it. So make sure you run 100% curve. See what else. Go back to the radio. So you can see pitch curve is just 0, 50, 100. So, and I have it like that for normal, idle up 1 and idle up 2. And let's see here, that's really it. I'll go into those mixes here in a bit. I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set up the Rev Max limiter as well as the Spartan gyro. But aside from those differences, that's really it. Nothing special when it comes to your interaction. Bobby was using the mix menu, Swash mix menu on the Futaba radio. For you guys Spectrum users, we don't have that obviously. So what you do is you go into your endpoint adjustments here, and you look for the right servo, either aileron or elevator servo or pitch servo. So for example, if you are moving your Swashplate up and down, say that instead of having this set up, we had no head right now and we had a Swashplate leveling tool, and I went full negative, for example, right now, and say that when I went negative, the swash was moving in one direction. Let's say it was moving right. What you do is you go in your endpoint adjustments, you find this servo, which could be either aileron or pitch, and you start moving your endpoint until the servo moves up or down until you can find the right leveling of the swash. I have not used the Swashplate leveling tool in years. I really think that they're a valuable tool when you're probably in the beginning or whatever, but as you get more experienced and you go to the field and you're capable of doing these climbs and feeling the helicopter, I always found it's best to do it out there in calm conditions, very little wind. You're always going to get the helicopter to fly better. I have found that if I use the Swashplate tool and I tweak it that way when I go to the field, it never really works out perfect. I have to end up doing it again, so it's always best to do it at the field. So I'm going to go ahead and show you how to set up the Rev limiter and the Spartan gyro. Alright guys, I'm going to show you very briefly on how to go ahead and set up your Rev Max limiter. Basically what you do is, the first thing you have to do is you have to set up your range, and that teaches the Rev Max limiter where the idle is and where the full throttle is. So what you do here is you turn off your receiver, you turn off your transmitter, and then this is what we do. Turn the transmitter back on. We're going to go ahead and toggle the switch that's associated with the Rev Max limiter. Since this is a 7100R receiver, it's automatically set to the gear channel. So what we do is we start toggling the gear channel, and while we toggle the gear channel up and down, we turn on the receiver. And as soon as the receiver arms, there's an LED right here called ACT that is going to start blinking. As soon as it starts blinking, I stop the toggle. So here we go. Make sure your throttle stick is all the way down. So I start toggling here, turn it on. I stop toggling, and now this LED is blinking. And that is telling me that the rev limiter is in setup mode. So now that it's in setup mode, I go ahead and I go all the way down, all the way up, full throttle, and I go all the way down, and then I toggle my gear switch one more time. That was my switch glow that went off right there. That basically teaches the system where the idle is and where the full throttle is. So once you're done with that, now the rev limiter knows how far it can go in terms of how far it can go to close the barrel, how far it can go to open the barrel. So once that's done, then what you do is you have to set up your speeds. There's a couple of different ways you can do that. What you basically do is you go to your gear channel. So I'm going to go here to my gear channel in the governor. Throttle adjustments. You go to your gear channel. And as you can see, this is set to 100 and 100. So what you do is you take your 100 value and you drop it down to something like, I don't know, let's say 70. And you just go fly. That's a conservative number. Set it at 70, you go fly, you take off, you get it into a hover, and you have somebody with a tack measure the head speed of the helicopter, the rotor speed. And obviously, like we've gone over this many times in the past, T-Rex 700, you want to be about 1950 or so. What this does is it just gives you one speed. So when you flip the switch to idle up 1 and idle up 2, it's still going to stay at 1950. Nothing's going to change. If you want more than one speed, then you can do what I do. I'm going to show you that here on the radio. So what you do is you leave your gear channel on the travel adjustments at 100. You leave that on modified. And then you go to your mixing menu here, program mix 1. And then what you do is you enable that. And you make sure you create a mix gear to gear on, and then you set a rate. I have minus 49. Why minus 49? That's because this is taking into account the gear channel position. Since the gear channel is at 100, I am taking 100 and then I'm subtracting 49. So I'm actually at 51% right here. So you make sure it's gear to gear on, you set your rate, and then right here where it says switch, F and R. That means that's normal mode. So every time I'm in normal mode now, I have minus 49. So 100 minus 49, that's 51%. That's going to set a speed. So what you do is you take off, you start a hover, and as you're hovering, you check your head speed, and you find the head speed you want. And that will be your head speed for normal mode. Then what you do is you go ahead and say mix number 2. Mix number 2, you enable it, and then you go gear to gear, same deal here, and then you go on your switch to FS12. And what that does is that creates a mix that only goes on when you're in idle up 1 and idle up 2. You set your different rate here. I have minus 37. And what that does is that's going to enable the mix. If I flip my switch to idle 1, that turns on. Idle 2 turns on. So what that does is that gives me my speed for idle up 1 and 2. And then same deal. You flip the switch to idle up 1 or idle up 2. You bring it into a hover, you tack it, and you find the right head speed for that. So it's not a very, I wouldn't say it's complicated, but it takes a little bit of work to get it configured. Once you get it set, then it's pretty much all set, good to go. What some people do, which is actually even easier, is you turn off your radio. You turn it on in your system menu. And what you do here is you go to your input select, and instead of having gear, you have it gear, gyro. What that does now is that gives me a gyro screen here. I'm going to look for it. And on the gyro screen, you have two numbers. It's set at 50-50. You change the rotor DR switch to the F mode switch, auto F mode. Now what you do is you set up numbers for each flight mode. So you automatically say, I want to do something like, I don't know, 60% for example for 0, and I want to do 80% for 1. And then I set my normal mode at 0, my stunt at 1. Now what this is doing is this telling the rev limiter to use 60% for normal mode and 80% for stunt 1 mode. So you actually end up using your gyro screen as your governor screen. And what that does is that just makes it very easy to change your speeds without having to use the mixes. Frees up your mixes for other purposes. And you might be asking yourselves, well, why the gyro screen? What do I do with the gyro? Well, just use the endpoints for the gyro. That's what I pretty much do. I just go to my endpoint adjustments and I set my number for the gyro sensitivity gain. And that works very, very well. So I'm going to show you now how to go ahead and set up your Spartan gyro. First thing you do is you have to make sure that, of course, you have it set to the right servo frequency. I'm running the Align DS650 tail servo, so this is the 1520 frequency. You want to make sure you have it set to the right frequency. That is the default frequency, it's 1520. The only time when you have to change this is when you're running a Futaba servo. Futaba is the only brand that uses a 720 frequency, 760. So if you do have a Futaba servo, make sure you go over the manual of your Quark or your DS760 Spartan gyro. Make sure you set it to the right frequency for that servo. Otherwise, you're going to end up burning your servo. So once you set up the servo type, what you do is you go ahead and on the Quark is a little bit different, even though it's kind of the same. You can enter setup mode in two ways. You can either toggle the switch that's associated with the gyro. In other words, I have it set up to the auxiliary switch, aux2. So I can toggle the switch to enter setup mode as I'm powering on the receiver. The Quark has a little button that you can push and hold to enter setup mode. There is a time when that button will not work though. You have to do that within so many seconds of powering on your receiver. Power on your receiver, you let the helicopter sit for a minute or two, you push that button, it's not going to go into setup mode. So a lot of people think, well, something's wrong with the gyro. There's nothing wrong. It's just a safety feature so you cannot accidentally go into setup mode. So instead of pushing the button, I'm going to go ahead and toggle the switch here to enter setup mode. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the receiver. I'm going to start toggling my auxiliary switch, auxiliary 2. I'm going to power on the receiver. And when you see the servo do that, it means we already entered setup mode. So the first thing you do is you hold the rudder stick all the way to the left. You hold it there for a second or two and you let it go. And what that does is that teaches the gyro to learn the right direction. The Quark gyro as well as the DS760 have a really pretty neat way of knowing which way it needs to correct. And that's what teaches it how to do it. So as soon as you do that, you let it go, then you toggle the switch one time. The tail will do that and it'll start going in one direction. So what this does is that this goes into the limits now. So as you can see, the servo is pointing backwards. So what I do here is I start pushing in that direction until I hear the servo start to bind. As soon as the servo starts to bind, I stop and I toggle the switch one time. Now as you can see, servo is pointing forward this time. Same deal. I start pushing until I can hear the servo starting to bind a little bit. And there's another way to do this. You can just be actually looking at your tail, look at your tail pitch slider until it goes all the way to one end, all the way to the other end. I usually just look at the servo because the servo starts telling me if it's binding. I pretty much go as far as I can go until it binds. And as soon as it starts binding, I back it off a little bit. That's it. So now I have that one adjusted, toggle it one time, and that's it. As soon as the setup is done, the servo loses power. And that's basically just a way for the Spartan gyro to force you into rebooting the system. There we go. The Quark gyro is a pretty standard gyro. It's ready to go. There's nothing, no adjustments needed. It works awesome on any helicopter, anywhere from a 250 to a 700. On the DS760, if you want to use the same program that I use on my Spartan gyros, you can go to bertrc.com and I have some files that you can download. that vary depending on the helicopter. And all I really do is I just add a little bit of delay, more or less delay depending on the type of helicopter.
Hey guys, I wanted to thank you for watching our third episode on setups. I hope that you bared with us through most of it. I know it was pretty technical and pretty dense. There's just no other way to explain it, but we hope we did the best job that we could. Just sitting in the editing room right now, just editing everything, and I realized we left off a few things, so I wanted to sacrifice a little bit of our professionalism to get some information across to you guys. Number one thing that I think we missed out on was throttle curves. If you're not running a governor, you want to have a good setup throttle curve. There's nothing wrong without, you don't have to run a governor. I did it for many years. I'm going to show you some pictures of what a good throttle curve looks like. A normal throttle curve, you want to start from 0%, and usually you want to go up to about 100%. I've seen some people go up to about 60 or 70%, but for the most part, you want it to have a full range and just soften it up at the bottom a little bit. For idle up 1 and idle up 2, you want a U curve or a V curve to where your top end, your full negative collective and your full positive collective both has 100% throttle. And then right in the middle point is going to be your lowest point, usually around 60 to 70%. If you wish, I usually make idle up 1 a little bit softer than idle up 2. So idle up, if you have it at 65%, you make idle up 2, let's say 75%. Something like that, somewhere in that region. The second thing that we left off on, which I don't know how we missed, we were quite busy that weekend, was exponential. For Futaba users, you want to be in negative exponential to soften it up a little bit. Spectrum and JR users, positive numbers refers to it being softer around center. Me personally, I start with at least 15 to 20% exponential for every single helicopter I have. It seems to just give it a little bit of a softer feel, makes the sticks less just snappy, you have a better feeling with it. So that means for Spectrum users, you'd want to be in the 15-20%. Bert does about the same. If a model needs any more than that, usually I try to soften it up mechanically with less aggressive paddles or something like that. But always try to have some sort of exponential in all your helicopters. The third thing that we neglected to mention anything about in the video was dual rates. I know a lot of you who fly airplanes are used to dual rates. What a dual rate is you can set a certain rate to a switch. So let's say switch A, for instance, your top left switch. You can make it to where when you flip that switch, it takes your cyclic rates, for instance, from 100% to 60%. So you could have a slow mode and a fast mode. Normally I tell people to stay away from this. There's a very few circumstances where a dual rate will actually help you. For the most part, I recommend staying away from this because if you're flying around in your fast setup and you flip the slow setup, and let's say you're coming near the ground, you need to pull out quickly, where you're used to your fast setup, and for some reason you're on the wrong switch during your flight, it can get nasty pretty quickly. So you can, if you want to, just realize in the back of your head whenever you flip that switch that okay, I'm pretty much flying like a different model. It's fast or slower, however you set it up. One condition where I will recommend it is practicing like a pirouetting flip or any sort of pirouetting maneuver if you're not too comfortable with it. I remember when I was first starting some pirouetting maneuvers, the hardest thing I found was to keep the stick pegged consistently at one certain spot. So let's say if I wanted to do a pirouetting flip at half the pirouette speed that the model normally has, keeping my thumb over there as I fully increase and decrease the collective was tough. So you could make a dual rate to where when you flip the switch, your rudder channel has, let's say 50% or 60% the throw that it normally does. So when you flip switch A, for instance, your rudder will spin half the speed. That's nice for practicing, left pirouette and right pirouette. I still do that to this day with practicing some things. Another reason you could do that was if if you know what you're doing, you're pretty conscious of it. If you want to have a fast mode and a slow mode, you're more than welcome to do that. But for the most part, I just tell guys to stay away from it. Now that we have everything correctly set on the bench, I just want to go over a few main things that you want to triple check before you fly. You want to make sure that your directions are right. I've had it backwards and that's no fun. You want to make sure that this is positive, negative, forward, back, left, right. And then the rudder we just set so we know that's right. You want to make sure these are right because if they're backwards, that'll ruin your day very, very quickly. So we're going to go out to the field, we're going to check three main things. First thing we want to check is the main blade tracking and the paddle tracking. If these are off, you want to change your links accordingly to make it correct. Second thing we want to do is we want to flip the tail into normal mode, not heading hole mode, normal mode, and we want to track the tail. I'm going to show you how to do that. Third thing we're going to do is do full collective climbs, both positive and negative. And we're going to make sure that the helicopter climbs both directions in a uniform manner. And then past that, you really want to make sure that you're climbing positive and negative with the same sort of speed. You want to make sure that you have the same amount of positive pitch as negative pitch. So here we go. So the first thing I'm going to do, I'm not even going to give any glow. I'm just going to turn over the motor and work my throttle stick to full open and full close, and you'll hear the difference. So let's listen. So that's closed, this is open. Closed, open. You can hear it. So we know that the throttle's right, so I'm going to give it some glow, open up my fuel and fire it out. Okay, so now that it's running, I know that my idle's about right. So I'm going to back my idle down a little bit. I'm going to hit hold, and hold's right where my idle is, so we're perfect. Okay, now that our engine's running and we're ready for the initial flight, we're going to take off. The first thing we want to look at is the main blade tracking. So I'm going to lift it up, and I'm going to check the tracking, and that's really, really close. That's really good. And we're also going to check the paddle tracking too, and the paddle's tracking perfectly. If it wasn't tracking, what we would do is we would land and we'd come down, and you can adjust either the long link or the short link. It doesn't matter which one. You just want to pick a link and stick with it. If the tracking gets better, keep going that way. If it gets worse, turn the link the other way. Okay, now that our main blades and our paddles are tracked, we're going to track the tail. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go up, and I'm going to go into my head speed. Right now I'm in like 1800 head speed, that's fine. First we want to track the tail in normal mode, that means no heading hold. So we have a strong wind from the left, so I want to keep the tail here because this is where the tail would naturally end up with the wind pushing it this way. So I'm going to click it out of hold, out of heading hold, and as you can see it's slowly turning towards the right, just a little bit. So what I want to do now is I want to land it, I want to come down, and I want to adjust my rudder linkage, the long push rod, and I'm going to give it a little bit of left so that I'm going to make it come back and it's going to trim perfectly. Then we're going to flip it into heading hold, we're going to fly. Okay, now that we track the rudder, we're just going to triple check that we're good. So we're going to go up, click into idle up 1. So we're going to do this, and we're going to hit it, and as you can see the tail stays right there, so we're good. Okay, so now I'm back in heading hold, and this is where the 520 and the Spartan will operate with their best efficiency. So now what we're going to do is we're going to trim it. So I'm just going to let go of my cyclic stick and see where it wants to wander. So I'm going to get it stationary and let go. It's actually pretty good, and we got a good strong wind today, so that's not bad. I'm going to angle it this way and check with the other direction of the wind. So I'm going to set it and let it go. It needs a few right clicks. Just get the trim as close as you can get. It's a helicopter. It's always going to need some sort of input. Okay, now that everything's trimmed, we're going to make sure that our swash is going up and down straight. So I'm going to idle up 1. There's no sort of shakes or everything's in trim. So we're going to give it a full climb and we're going to see how it goes. So that was pretty good. It's leaning forward. So what I want to do is I want to hit hold or I just want to land. And I have a Futaba radio, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into my swashed aileron and swashed elevator mix. I'm going to go, for our instance, it was going forward. So at full collective, I'm going to raise my stick to the top. I'm going to go to the value and I'm going to change it so it gives some back elevator so that when it climbs, it'll go straight. So let's try that. Okay, I just adjusted my value. We'll put it in idle up again, and we're going to see. Here we go. Perfect. Climbed up perfectly straight. So now we're going to check for negative. For the guys who aren't going inverted yet, what you can do here is give a good amount of negative pitch and see how it comes down. So here we go. That was pretty good. That wasn't bad. Let me just triple check, go upside down, and go up and triple check. So here we go. We're going negative. So that's pretty good. Now I forgot to mention that for Spectrum users, If you do not have the swash mix, for instance, at this point, if your aileron or elevator wanted to lean or a certain way, positive or negative, instead of going to a swash menu, you would simply go to your endpoint menu, raise and lower your stick, and you would adjust the values on either your aileron, pitch, or elevator servo to get the desired direction. So what we want is for it to go up and down perfectly when we give it correction. So right now, everything's set.
No canopy.
Oh, no canopy, yes. For me, I find it, Bert and I both find it easier to just set up these helicopters and just get them pretty close to where we want them without the canopy on. Once we put the canopy on, if that adds any weight, we'll fine tune them, but it's just easier to get a look at everything. It's just a personal preference. All right, thank you guys for watching our episode. Hopefully we taught you a little bit of how to set up a helicopter, so it'll make it easier to do stuff like this. Oh man, this is some exciting stuff. This setup gets me going, man.
What are you doing?
I'm just watching, I'm not sure. Here.
Oh, it's a drink. Look at this nice glass. What's in this?
Nothing. Is that right?
It's good.